You can see the Golan. Well, I can see a little outline of it there, but it's very tenuous. And the sun is making its way through a lot of cloud. Quite different than yesterday's. The basic infinity of artistic variations in nature. The gift of a new day. The water still pours in here, although the mikveh sources are very, very weak right now. There was also a major restructuring of the drainage of the Netofa Valley to the west of us, and that would get flooded every couple of winters, but that seems to have been solved or rerouted, and so it affects also our water tables here. It's so calm, right? And our stories today are about storms. Basically, all the readings are revealing storms, or moments after storms, or the middle of storms. Not just the gospel reading. And that prompts me that I should probably go into Duke and Altum as well. With a storm on the sea. Elijah in the first reading is going to Mount Sinai. He's already arrived there. He's in a cave. And he hears an invitation of the Spirit to go out of the cave to meet God because there's a huge storm. And God wasn't in the storm. That's interesting, isn't it? Because also the message is that in all the storms, God is in the storm. But actually in the case of, oh, there's the sun is totally disappearing now. I'm not sure if we'll see any more of it. So that's a good reason also to go inside and take advantage of the opportunity to see the storm and the sea we have in the mosaic. It's 100%, almost 100% cloud coverage. Up in the zenith, it's not, in the zenith it's not so intense, but it's still basically 100% cloud coverage. It's very hot here. Last night it was stayed above 30. The whole night, even with the windows open and the fan, it was rather warm. So Elijah's after his big storm on Mount Carmel, he flees for his life, because after the execution of the 450 prophets of Baal, he's on his way of escape from Jezebel, who threatened his life. She said, within 24 hours you'll be like them. And it's interesting also that in Mount Horeb he doesn't hear God in the storm, but he does in the light breeze. And he had a very stormy approach to the prophets of Baal. It's above my pay grade to pronounce on those things, although I know one bishop who said that when God spoke to him, that doesn't show up in our reading today, but the message was, go and anoint 2 kings and a successor prophet. By the way, if any of you left this hat here yesterday, you can pick it up, okay? Was it yesterday, or that was actually maybe the day before? Oh, I should turn on some lights. So this is how it works here. This is the light for the, where's my finger? For the atrium, underneath the pillars. And these are for the chapels. Light makes a big difference, doesn't it? So here we have the storm on the sea in the Singapore chapel. Thinking of all our Singapore friends who were very good to have sponsored this chapel. And here we have the scene today. It's actually, this is in all the Gospels, but we have the Matthew version here, Matthew 14, that's our text today. And we have this marvelous rendition with 160,000 tiles of Venetian glass, and the text from Matthew 14, and the scene. And this particular chapel, like the other chapels, has a geographical orientation, and here it's picking up the hills around the Sea of Galilee. Basically, there are hills all around in a way, except for the plain of Gennesaret. And the north side as well isn't immediately a hill, although close. And then we have nighttime. It's in the 4th watch. Some critics said if the moon is that big, it can't be the 4th watch, because the full moon rises like this, and when it's a full moon, it's gone off to the west when the 4th watch arrives. So it's late in the night. They say the darkest hours before the dawn. In the dark of the storm, the dark of the sea at night, in the midst of the storm. The waves here, how the artists express and try to communicate the danger for these disciples in the boat. Why do we have storms? Well, there's a very good natural reason. The storms serve the distribution of water, the purification distribution of water, because from the oceans it evaporates, and then the storms distribute the water onto the continents, and then it runs back to the seas and evaporates again, evaporates also on land. And so the storms have a very positive natural purpose. At least that's one of them. But the storms, I think also, I'd like to use a farming example, are a little bit like the plow in the hand of the gardener of our soul. If we just had a quiet sea all the time and no storm, we would become very complacent. That's our tendency. And the storm stirs things up. We really learn that we are not in control. The forces of nature are so immense. We're simply not in control. We're at the mercy of the waves, at the mercy of the storm. Some storms are horrendous. Just think of the hurricanes, the typhoons. A storm at home on the farm when I was a little child knocked down 8 huge ash trees. They were obviously old and therefore weaker inside. And the storm sweeps things away. But the storms are a hoe in the hand of the gardener. You know, you cannot sow, let's say this is the garden here, you cannot sow flowers here, vegetables, potatoes, grain, without breaking up the soil. And the storms in our lives break up a lot of our complacencies, of our status quo, of our controlled patterns of dominion, and we lose control of the outside reality. And the worst part of it then is if we lose control of the inside reality. How do we stand in a storm? How do we walk on the stormy seas? How do we discern the gardener with his hoe stirring up the soil in our garden to sow a new crop that will bring forth much faith, much hope, much love, that will allow us to grow deeper in understanding of life? Lord, save me. And the other part of the phrase is, I perish. We just have this part here, Lord, save me. And then Jesus' call, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? The thing is that in the midst of our storms, there's another force working. And that's the one that's holding the hoe. And he's doing it with a purpose. And this storm is a great, great benefit to Peter and to the apostles, and also to us today. It opens up a whole dimension of how we relate to each other. The serenity, the majesty, the authority. We're not abandoned to our natural forces. There's a very important word in the spiritual life, supernatural, above the natural forces. And that's the power of God, the Creator, the power of the Redeemer, of our provident Lord. To discover this power and to cry out, Lord, save me. I need you. And there's no waves even at his feet. Wherever Jesus is, there's peace. And it's not the peace of the absence of storms and conflicts. It's the presence of his purpose and his gift of strength to go through the storm, to not only survive the storm, but to thrive in the storm. To thrive in the storm. Because the storms are meant for our growth, for bearing abundant fruit, for carrying in the rain of grace into our lives, to pour it down from heaven. And we see Paul is going through a tremendous storm. Elijah was going through a tremendous storm with the infidelity of the people, the worship of the false gods. And now with Paul's very clear understanding that the Messiah has come and his own people are rejecting the Messiah. But he doesn't see this just as face value. he goes behind it and he sees a great mystery of God's grace. And the text we have today is just part of it. It's actually a few chapters. You could continue reading what Paul says. And he has great hope. And he knows that the promise of God is unbroken. God keeps his promise. God is faithful. And Paul is searching then for God's plan for his people. Paul is going through a tremendous emotional, passionate storm internally. He even has an expression there, I would be accursed if I could save my people, in the sense that I would take any suffering, even that God would sacrifice me and my salvation for the sake of my people. Amazing the love, the storms parents go through when a child is very sick, or when a child goes on drugs. There's a family writing to me for the last few months for prayers and little updates about a child who eloped with a guy, and it's all not so clear what the situation is, and the anguish they go through in concern for their child. We penetrate a little bit this same type of feelings that Paul is suffering. But he's reaching out like Peter here in the water in the middle of the storm to understand God's plan. And through this storm, there's so much fruit. The expressions of these chapters are so powerful, and they're embedded in our hearts. The promise of God is irrevocable. We have that line because Paul went through that struggle. And that reveals God's plan for situations that we don't like, don't expect. God's promise is irrevocable. His covenant is irrevocable. His gift is irrevocable. And maybe we go through very stormy times. We just have to discover the presence of the supernatural, the presence of another force, another level. And we have another text from Paul which says elsewhere that the battles of this life, the storms of this life, are not between the earthly forces, the natural forces only. They're between supernatural forces. And there's a great invitation for us to let in God's power into our lives. Maybe we'll do the little goodbye selfie right here with this background. God bless you. See you later, alligators. Maybe some of you will be joining for Mass. We'll continue being blessed by these readings of Scripture in a couple of hours' time at 8:15. See you later, alligators. Let's see how much sun we missed. I don't think it's very much. There's no sign of the sun at all. It should be blazing in here right now. But there's no sign at all. You can't even see where it is in the sky. The cloud is that intense. Well, God bless you all, people. Blessings today. Blessings for you. See you later, alligators.